Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Kings of the North. We are hopping into our last series of the night. Joining with me is Zombie Grub. How you doing?
I'm good. I haven't really changed much since the last time you asked me.
That's great to hear.
Yes.
Sometimes things change. Sometimes your favorite player gets knocked out of the event. And sometimes you get to just watch another hype, awesome rematch from many other NA LAN events. And this is one of them, Zombie Grub. JonSnow versus MaSa. I like to think of the big moment where JonSnow really kind of became GodSnow over at Cheesadelphia, number 4, where he actually beat MaSa 3-0 in the semifinals. A really big breakout performance for him.
Yeah, and how long ago was that?
That was, I think, beginning of the beginning of this year? It may have actually been February of this year. It's been a while.
I'm trying to test you on your NA knowledge. Bro.
Oh.
Bruh, please.
Bruh.
Bruh.
Do you know the answer? Is it really a test? I could have told you anytime, and you would have believed me.
And I could tell you anytime, and you can't really dispute it. So
That's
how that works.
That's true. That's how this works.
Amazing. Knowledge here. Anyways, actually, I am looking forward to this matchup, whether it's historic or not. I just think that MaSa is, maybe not looking as great as ever, but he is throwing out some mech builds, which is always interesting. And then JonSnow is looking as great as ever. Dependable JonSnow, actually consistently rising, looks to be just in fine form for this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is really going to be more so, kind of like what you were saying, JonSnow just seems to be very consistently rising and is consistent at the tournament, consistent snow. It is, in a lot of at least my mind, it's going to be more about how is MaSa going to play? What kind of MaSa is going to be able to turn up to this series? Because generally, we've talked about this multiple times. MaSa is the player that it's really how he's doing on a particular day, not just a particular series. So can he really turn that around?
I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like today, of course, he just beat Jim Rising 3-1, but even that one, it was tricky and, mad props to Jim Rising for doing it. But even that one, maybe he's thinking like, I probably shouldn't have, I usually beat Jim Rising a lot. Like, okay, I don't know. Like, I mean, it feels like this is an off day for him, which is just really unfortunate when it comes to tournament time because you really only have usually 3 days, but in this case, 2 days to show your best stuff. Before you're potentially knocked out. So he's already survived this long, but could still be knocked out by JonSnow. And not having a good day, doesn't matter if tomorrow's better.
Yeah, that's absolutely true because he doesn't get another shot, like you said. But the kind of nice thing is that I think a lot of the reason why he's maybe not feeling as good is just because he was, people were mentioning before, Scarlett was saying, oh, you saw him just sleeping somewhere, just because I think he's lacking sleep a little bit right now. So, you know what? If he can make it tomorrow, he can get a good night's rest. Sometimes you get the best night's rest after you've just had a night of no sleep. So maybe tomorrow can be better. But like you said, it is one final hurdle. JonSnow he has to beat to make it to tomorrow, to the final day.
And then he can finally sleep and have a different day tomorrow. But JonSnow just played up against Sembro, which you guys are seeing right now. And it was a long, grueling battle. Every single game was, even the game that started off with an all-in. And while JonSnow might be a little fatigued about that, it does put him in preparation to play against potentially long games against MaSa's mech, perhaps, or even just going into the late game versus that bio, because MaSa can play, and we'll play both.
That's a really interesting question is, do you think that MaSa will go for mech? Because I've talked to various players here today, and some people think, MaSa sometimes he seems to go mech, sometimes he doesn't, but it really doesn't seem super consistent on whether or not he's going to do so. Maybe it's depending on the player or some other factor, but
sometimes it is map dependent, but I feel like lately with the rise of mech in the last 6 months, there's Gumiho Gumiho's always a mech player, but kind of proven that it would even be useful in GSL finals, right? And then innovation, bringing out more builds. I feel like people are just looking to use that as a different way of playing. Just to, like you throw in a different build, you throw in a different style, right?
Yeah.
In a best of 3, best of 5, whatever. So I don't know if that's MaSa's plan, or maybe he just really is like, you know what? I feel like going mech right now. Yeah, that sounds like a good thing to do. Yeah, I'm gonna do that because I totally do what he's doing.
I totally actually feel like MaSa's one of those kind of players who he'll think about whether or not it makes sense to go for a particular build order or something in a particular situation. He'll do it, but on the spot. And a lot of the time it is sort of the mind game of like, well, the last thing they'll expect right now, because I've gone so many games as Bile, is that I just do go mech. Or maybe he feels like, you know what, on the ladder, I rarely go mech versus JonSnow, but versus this particular series, I'm going to go Mech versus JonSnow, just opening up.
Yeah.
MaSa's that kind of player.
MaSa's always kind of been a question mark, I guess, to continue talking about him. We see actually JonSnow maybe being helped by No Regret.
Oh, God. We
Oh,
got
boy.
the all-ins
Oh,
coming
no.
out, dishing them out.
Yeah, like he's always just been a kind of a question mark. You know, he doesn't really talk a lot. He doesn't stream a lot. Or when he does stream, it's not like too communicative. He doesn't. You don't really get to see the inside of his brain, and you don't really see it in his style either. Like he's just solid on all accounts, and he tries all things, but he's never really been like super stylistic aside from his strengths. His strengths are what makes him, I think, what everyone identifies as a style. But it's not actually like super stylistic. You know, oh yeah, it's the MaSa style way of playing.
I think it used to be more so the case way back in the day when you'd always see MaSa, and he'd be the one that was always going for proxies and aggression and everything. But since then, he's very much rounded out his playstyle. He's gotten good at macro. And like you said, he's kind of gotten better at just honing his strengths and just becoming a more all-around player.
Yeah. It's actually really hard for me to pinpoint exactly what I would call MaSa, other than just like a strong player. You know, like sometimes he can be super cheesy depending on the day. Sometimes he can play mech all 5 games.
Sometimes he can go through the entirety of WCS Challenger, beating even players like Neeb 3-0 by literally proxying every single game the entirety of Challenger and actually winning it.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, it's a mixture of just playing to his strengths, to his opponent's strengths, or weaknesses rather, and then I suppose maps also do eventually have something to do with it. But JonSnow, I guess, talk a little bit about him. Oh, actually, we're getting into the game.
Oh,
so take
even
it away.
better. All right, spawning down here, audience. I want to hear you guys on this one. We have the red Terran player. Give it up for MaSa.
OSC Pro MaSa.
And spawning up here in the top left-hand corner of the map, we have the blue Zerg player. Give it up for Psystorm Gaming's
Psystorm JonSnow.
JonSnow.
You know, that's going to be a really sad chance for JonSnow after he gets knocked out.
Hey,
Oh.
potentially.
Oh, unless he makes it all the way to the grand finals and wins.
Yes, of course. That's always the...
I just imagine the grand final ceremony, someone still chanting, "Let's go, Johnsnow."
Yeah, as Neeb hoists the trophy. Yeah, that's probably going to happen, considering what they seem to be planning on anyways. All right, well, yeah, before we got actually into the game, the player introductions, just going to talk a little bit about JonSnow, and I think, of course, most notably playing against Semper just not 30, 40 minutes ago. He has been well tested in TVZ, and especially late game TVZ, which he also finds himself very comfortable. Semper did as well, but obviously JonSnow was a little bit better with the 3-1. I wonder how MaSa is going to compete. I mean, maybe there's more of the mid-game finishes to the game. Maybe JonSnow still continues Roach Ravager all-inning, which he threw out once or twice.
Yeah, you know, it was really interesting because he was talking with players like Semper, he was talking with Scarlet, and actually even talking with Neeb a little bit, saying like, okay, what am I going to do? And one of the really interesting things that he said, I kind of made a hint at this before, but I didn't want to say it until they started the game. JonSnow was really convinced, just really absolutely certain that MaSa was not going to open mech versus him, which I thought was really kind of strange, just because MaSa has been going for mech, as you said, so often this tournament.
Yeah,
that is in general.
Yeah, that's actually really weird to hear. You know, consider 6 months ago, you say X player is never going to play mech against me. Well, that makes sense. They never play mech against anyone. Like, you know, what a concept. But no, nowadays, a lot of people, if they play it once, they're practicing it. So they play it more than once, you know? There are certain, like, Beyond, I don't think I've seen play mech, even still, despite the Innovation Senpai. So, I don't know. But, yeah, MaSa's not enough mech that I'm surprised JonSnow is so, he believes that so strongly, because that actually is a belief that could bite you in the butt, man.
Yeah,
like, you don't bother scouting. It could be really
This
hurtful.
is really nice, though. He's going to catch the SIV before the command center's finished up. Those 6 lings going to be able to delay this natural.
Ooh.
Actually getting it very low. You might be able to force a complete cancel on this. That would be huge. The Reaper is making its way back, but it's still so far away.
You got to pull the SCVs. There's too many lings.
Oh.
Even if you brought the Reaper back, they could actually still tear down the command center in time. So it is going to take care of it, but I believe he's also making a bunker somewhere.
Yeah, this is still just getting so dicey
Third
because he
base.
built it. Okay, well, that's not going to be very helpful with these lings, but he does clean up all of the lings eventually. Might lose one more SCV. No, manages to save it, but so much lost mining time. And the
Yeah.
command center is going to have to be repaired out, which is more of a lost mining time.
Yeah, I would usually say that's a pretty good use of 6 lings, but this bunker block is actually a little bit making me question mark it. You don't really want to put your third hatchery most of their places on Abyssal, although a lot of Zergs do put it where I think he's putting it right now, which is the middle right.
Yeah, I've even seen some players, instead of just going for like even the middle top side of the map, you go on the low ground, a little bit more forward. I don't really like that position as much, but I've seen it occasionally, and I think this is, like you said, more of just a compromise to a bad situation.
Yeah, but some people do like it, so I hope that he's like studied it and seen it and at least seen its strengths so that he's not too off-put by this decision he had to make.
Yeah, wow, Reaper really surviving for a while and making its way into the main base. Not really getting a scout on too much besides just seeing some gas, but actually distracting the Queen, so they pull away from the natural, getting 6 drones BBQ'd. It's going to be able to back out of there even with one of the Hellions still alive.
Yeah. More Hellions on the way and possibly into, well, he's been going Viking and then Raven, maybe Banshee, but it's Abyssal Reef, so Raven would not be a bad idea just to harass. But also, we saw him do it on Acolyte, clear up, creep, spread. This Overlord, a slow Overlord, going to get a freebie scout, but it's going to need to come back later to specifically scout for mech, which again, JonSnow, if he's really confident, might make a mistake about.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what JonSnow opts to do, if he's just going to be okay being a little bit more in the dark about that or what. But one thing that MaSa is definitely pretty oftentimes very good at is getting those drones roasted and just doing nice aggression in the kind of mid and early game stages. But we already have the Spore Crawlers going down, so even though there are Widow Mines on the way, it's going to be a little harder to deal with those. He's going to have detection for at least most of the Banshees and should at least have all the tools he needs to help defend here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he has gotten a lot in a lot of these series today, Hellion run-bys, that he really should not be getting as many drone kills or even anywhere close to the drone line. JonSnow seems to be especially on point about not letting them close.
This third also, the more I'm thinking about it, the more vulnerable it feels like to big Hellion run-bys and everything. It's such a open area. There's so much space for these Hellions to maneuver, and even though the creep is connecting the bases, it takes a long time for Queens to help out over here. Even the Lings take some time to actually transfer over to that third.
Yeah, there is already a lot of creep spread there, though, so unless MaSa was prepared to give away his Hellions, he wasn't going to be able to actually dive forward. And there weren't that many drones anyways. Like, why dive forward? So I like that he pulled back. He's going to save it. Combo with the Raven, so he can clear up the creep spread.
Yeah, nice for cleaning up creep spread. And also nice if you put it right behind that natural base. You can throw down some auto turrets and just put on some really, really easy harassment. Actually, it's going to be going in with some of these Hellions once again. Gets 3 drones and backs out of there after losing a Hellion or 2. Ling's going to give chase, but MaSa about to turn that around. JonSnow pulling back. It seems like overall JonSnow hasn't taken too much damage, but he is he's an okay drone count. He's at 54, but still losing a few here and there. How do you feel about the economic situation right now?
I think it's still fine. I think the most important thing about a situation like this, where you're taking like okay damage, is to just not freak out about it.
Yeah.
It's the ones that keep their composure and keep their timings and keep their rhythm. As a Zerg player, the ones that make this look like no big deal, and it's the ones that get supply blocked and forget their gas timings. They're the ones like, oh wow, 10 drones did more than I think they did.
Yeah, 8 more workers go down, and I mean JonSnow's replacing them as they die, so it's not the end of the world. But still, at this point, 55 workers. This isn't exactly what you consider a healthy number. It's a satisfactory number of drones.
Yeah, I mean, he's also making more Lings, which I thought he had enough of for a little while longer, but his scouting since that first Overlord has been cut because of the Viking, and that might have put him in a very uncomfortable position. So again, that paired with what is nice damage on the drones is probably really throwing off his game. So he's definitely finding himself in a bit of a pickle, and MaSa is just continuing to macro up, get that third base down. His Raven should never, ever be touched, really. Does this correctly.
Yeah, although
but
the Raven's going straight into the Queens and ends up losing it. That is a bit unfortunate. Auto turret getting little bits of pieces of damage done to the Lings, but the drone's going to go untouched mostly, besides those 3 that ended up falling earlier. And we got a handful of Marines out for MaSa, so it's worth noting, since we just haven't touched on it yet, is that he does not, in fact, go for mech this game.
Right, it is bio, which I'm not sure JonSnow has been able to, again, scout for a little while. At this point, it's definitely obvious a third base was taken. Like, that's no question.
Yeah.
But it's, 8 minutes, and the push is arriving. It's going to have a couple of Hellbats, perhaps. I don't know if their armory is close to finishing. And it is clearing up that creep, no problem, with the Raven.
Okay, Queens do have a lot of transfuses available, and these Marines are starting to back off very quickly. The medevacs have to be careful not to take too much damage from those Queens. I think losing a little bit of health on one of those, but manages to sneak out of there.
It's like the Queens are a little more scared. They didn't want to chase the medevacs too far forward, but they have to be very careful as, this many Marines, they will snipe a queen before you transfuse because you're, of course, macroing there at the time, controlling your lings and making them try and just micro them back. So still a tough situation for JonSnow, who does expand forward. I would say a lot more times when you see them take the right base in this situation, you like Sunano takes the right, like even further right base, not the middle one.
Well, we do have a nice little Ling run by over here. Penguin is talking about how JonSnow is always capable of finding little bits and pieces of damage and actually be able to sneak a little bit of a kill on one of those drops, and the Lings sneak their way into that third. There are a handful of Marines over there, though, so they're going to be dealt with pretty quickly. I believe the Hydras are on the way, as well as some Banelings, with the Baneling nest having finished up. JonSnow looking to try and take a really solid mid-game engagement.
Well, MaSa is building his own tanks. Considering on his own upgrades, not too badly timed. He's got a double drop heading into the main base. Not full, but certainly enough to deal damage as he pairs it up with maybe an attack somewhere else with these Hellbats. And actually, I'm not sure this is seen.
I don't think it's seen at all.
Oh, he saw it.
Oh, okay.
Or he predicted it?
Handful. He might have seen the medevac floating around from another angle. Okay. Gonna be able to get out of there. Barely.
Yeah, very barely. Unfortunately, the rocks are still up, and it took a long time for those Marines to crash down. And there's actually not a fourth base there anyways. So where that could have distracted for one party or the other.
Might actually be a little bit problematic.
Should get a few drones if he went there immediately.
Yeah, nice focus fire down on the Banelings. Leaves the Hellbats, since those will handle these Lings well. And hey, if they trade off for this with the Banelings, it's not the end of the world. He's going to be able to back out of there with the rest of these, regroup a little bit, and maybe push back in. But this is a lot of units over here from JonSnow.
Well, he actually gets a portion of them disconnected just with the AI, and MaSa tries to pounce on it, gets a handful of Lings and a couple of Hydras. Not too bad, but MaSa's also taking a fourth base. It's almost done. He's actually reaching into the late game just as well as JonSnow is here with an Ultralisk Cavern now on the way. Another drop in the natural. That Sporkroller just barely doesn't get that medevac.
Both of the medevacs so low. The Hydra should be able to finish both of them off and prevent the lift up over here. Getting the snipe off over there. And we got a couple of these Infestors looking for some good fungal growth. I think I saw one whiff earlier. MaSa retreating out of there very, very quickly and trying to focus fire down as many of these Banelings as possible. That is the money fungal that he was looking for. Gets a full cleanup on majority of those Marines. And even those medevacs getting caught now.
Yeah, one or two might go down. Yeah, I was surprised how many he managed to save, but no, two did in fact go down. Now catching up to his tanks, which he was missing the number of them anyways for that one attack. He's able to replace them. He's actually got to worry more about the Ultras that are on the way. He's got a planetary, but he's still only working with Biofactory. I don't believe he's put down a second starport.
Yeah, the Ultras are going to cause a lot of problems right now for MaSa, just because, like you said, he's not entirely, doesn't feel like he's going to be entirely prepared for them unless he starts preparing for them soon. JonSnow going to try and buy some time with Ling counterattacks, has that creep spread that's also helping by a lot of time, and oh god, the medevac's also getting pretty far behind, losing their lives to the Hydras, makes it difficult to retreat out. Siege Tank's going to be taken out as well, and suddenly JonSnow's looking really solid, but he has to still defend his main base.
Yeah, it's nice that MaSa got a drop there, because otherwise that was a pretty nasty loss for him. All of those medevacs going down, and again, no two starports, so he could not possibly go into Liberators after this, but he doesn't find the Ultras Cavern. Instead, he finds the spawning pool, which is not as good of a pickoff.
Not a great pickoff, but the nice thing is that with Hive Tech just finishing up and, of course, being scouted, it is going to actually potentially delay Adrenal Glands, since I don't think that was
that was already done.
Oh, it was already done? Okay,
yeah,
wow.
so, like, extra special, not great killing the spawning pool. Yeah, I was actually kind of wanted to note that a while ago that he did put a lot of emphasis on getting that as the fastest upgrade. We usually see Carapace or Chitinous Plating.
Well, those Lings definitely going to be effective, but will take a little while to replace for a bit. But okay, the drop over at the top side while the Lings try and go for the harassment over on the south side. Manages to get a cancel or a kill on that hatchery with these Lings. Not quite as successful.
Yeah. We definitely see JonSnow starting to bank a little bit because of not being able to make Lings, but there's not an actual really big attack happening, so he'll eventually be able to use that in all of his larvae that he's banked up. He's really not at that great of a supply. This is an Ultra user, that has plating, but isn't really, there's not a lot of excess to it. So if MaSa were to take a fight, maybe he just target fires down the Ultras one at a time. That's a scary thought, but MaSa is probably still thinking like, oh, he has Infestors, he has Ultras, like I can't actually push out yet.
Yeah, it's sort of weird, just the way that JonSnow's been playing. He teched up so quickly, but he's been down in supply nearly the entire game. Even from like the early and mid game, it just feels as though MaSa's had more units, but JonSnow just had more tech. But Here we go. Drop over the natural. Is going to be able to snipe off the evolution chamber. Researching +3 armor. That's a big one.
I think he still will be able to. Only Hydras came to respond. And they don't take out enough Marines. They actually take out the drop. Ultra's coming to the right side. Fungals as well. But MaSa has a pretty good split. There's not a lot of bile left over.
Yeah, Ultras trying to make their way forward, but these siege tanks just taking so many pot shots at these Ultras as they try and close the distance. Finally, they do, but majority of them have already fallen at this point.
Ooh, he did burrow a Baneling, but I think only one. The Evolutioners did, in fact, go down, and he was maybe going to go after the Spire, but had to pay attention to the fight. Lots of tanks survived. He is starting to build Liberators now, as well as a 5th base, I believe, on location. MaSa didn't seem to really need Liberators too much. Those tanks actually did their work.
Yeah, and on top of that, +3/+3 is going to be finishing up for MaSa pretty soon. JonSnow having had his +3 armor sniped off is going to be in a lot of trouble once that finishes, because he's just going to be down in upgrades for a really long time. But these Ultras getting some nice cleaves. Unfortunately, they also get sniped off pretty quickly by these Liberators in the tanks. Again, GG!
GG indeed. You know, there was a time, but I'm all like, you know, I guess, I don't know. I don't believe it anymore, right? Gotten older where I was like, yeah, you know, tanks are really good, guys. Like, swear, I swear. Tanks, you know, double tank, even triple tank, something that Thermal was doing. Like, I believe that it can be a powerful mid-game into a powerful late-game response to Ultras. I believe in it. And just like every single time I say it, it never was. You know, you needed Liberators. You needed to eventually get to Ghosts. And I was like, well, that feels bad. But, you know, a lot of that time it was because they got to Broodlords as well as Ultras, and Broodlords are that hard counter to tanks. But even if they didn't go for Broodlords, I still thought the surrounds that would happen from the Zerg player, the fungal would still be too good.
Yeah.
I think JonSnow just took an awkward engagement, as best I could put it.
It definitely was. And one thing that was also surprising is you bring up the Broodlords, and I actually do feel like in the games versus Semper, I feel like he was throwing down that Spire a good bit earlier. He was throwing down the Spire, I feel like, a lot of time before he even finished up chitinous plating, which was surprisingly fast. So almost just preparing for the Corruptors first to deal with Liberators, but then even after that to get up potentially a greater Spire a little bit faster. In this game, it seems like maybe just versus MaSa, he feels like he doesn't quite have that time to do it that quickly.
Usually it's such a nice progression. You get the Spire for the Corruptors that are dealing with the growing Liberator count, and then you get to go to Broodlords, maybe include some Vipers, I don't know. But there's that progression, whereas this game, the Liberators, as I said, like, were actually not that important, surprisingly. Like, they came at the last second, and they kind of helped deal with the leftover Ultras, but the other reinforcements helping as well. Yeah, the tanks had done so much work already that the Corruptors actually weren't even that necessary. But, you know, there could have been something about JonSnow just trying to dive too deep into the late game, thinking that he was safe against someone he saw only had tanks. Like I said, I think JonSnow would maybe agree. I don't know. But, like, seeing, you know, still on Marine tank, I got a fine chance with Ultras. And this is one of those games where it actually did not work out.
Yeah. Well, map number 2 looks like it's going to be Acolyte. Or sorry, no, that's actually game number 4. Goes from the bottom up. It's going to be Ascension to Ire for game number 2.
I don't think there's any reason why we would read it the other way, but I did the same thing. I don't know why.
Neither do I.
Like, it kind of makes sense both ways, so I just you're probably going to read.
It's probably because the snow is falling from top to bottom. So our eyes are guided down.
That's actually a fair point. It's snowing.
Oh, I was just making stuff up.
Well, I think I like it. Okay, it's Kings of the North. It's snowing because it snows in the north.
So shouldn't it favor JonSnow? But he's down 0-1, Zombie Grub.
Well, it's the weirdest thing because he's JonSnow, but he's American, which is less north than MaSa, who lives in Canada.
Yeah. He also, I think he also probably doesn't really like the north as much.
Although, doesn't JonSnow live in New York?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, the character in Game of Thrones.
Well, I just like Toronto and New York are actually like. So
yeah,
there actually is a thing.
She took a bus ride
There's
over
more
here.
north states than some of Canada.
This is true. JonSnow actually did have pretty rough bus ride over. I think he also didn't get a ton of sleep.
Oh, yeah, he said it was like 10 hours, but he found it okay.
Yeah, he
said
it was like okay, but I think he also said that he like got an okay amount of sleep last night. So
yeah,
still he seemed pretty tired, especially end of day 1.
Yeah, it's probably that soundproofing, man. You could actually hear every mouse in that house. It was yeah.
Are there a lot of mice in that house?
I don't know, man. But there's a lot of sounds. all right. There's a lot of people.
Yeah, I heard you were saying that Scarlet sleep talks.
Yeah, but I don't know if that would have come through the walls. Maybe it did. Maybe actually that woke her up in the middle of the night. Yeah, she's just screaming about Terran, and JonSnow wakes up like, oh, not again.
Not again. Not like this.
Nah, I don't know. But I am kind of with him here, but of course he's the one that's under a little bit more stress in the loser's bracket from the get-go. Or no, actually, he wasn't from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, he got knocked down by Neve,
down.
so it was like one of the early matches, the first matches of the day. But still, yeah, he's, for the entirety of this offline event after getting knocked down by Neve, he's been in the loser's bracket. So it's definitely been rough. And knowing that you have to have like this waiting period between each match, it really does start to drain you a little bit.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And actually, I'm just realizing that they both, I think, they're both lacking sleep here. MaSa's also.
It's an even fight.
Similar things. Yes, it's an even fight we're ever going to get between these two.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And honestly, I don't really feel. I mean, I do think that JonSnow took like moderate amounts of damage from MaSa.
Yeah.
It wasn't devastating, but I feel like overall it was a pretty potentially even game. Up until the, like, I guess that one engagement where it seemed like the Ultras getting shelled away at by the tanks, having to wrap around that corner.
Yeah, that's why I said like awkward best describes it, because I think if they had actually gotten into an open area, which is hard to find on Abyssal but does happen, that's when it's actually not nearly as bad. But here we are in Ascension to Ire, and it could be a very different game with many more open spaces.
Okay, but here we go. We are going to be starting up here in the top left-hand corner of the map. The blue Zerg player from Psystorm Gaming. Give it up for
Psystorm JonSnow.
And spawning down over here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, we have the red Terran player. Give it up for
OSC Pro MaSa.
Let's go Canada. This is actually the America versus Canada showdown.
It is. Although, I mean,
We had a lot of them.
Korean. Poor guy never gets a passport.
MaSa's a Canadian at this point, I feel.
Of course he is, but Canada doesn't agree.
Oh, man.
Country laws. What are they even? Anyways, it is a bit of a fun matchup in that way, I suppose. I don't know how many other Americans are here. Me, you.
There's Neve, there's JonSnow. Handful of people in the audience, I'm sure.
Yeah, okay. I guess we're
USA.
We're outnumbered, oh Lord.
We are outnumbered.
Ready?
Yeah. Whatever, man. You know, we could be outnumbered 1 to 27, but we still got Neve on our side, so.
Yeah. All right. Well, that last game did start off with JonSnow going for. That was actually, I think, enough damage to be worth the early pool and the 6 Lings investment. Sometimes we see 6 Lings and the Reaper stays at home and it's just like, well, that was a complete waste. Like, oh, God, no. But that actually caused a lot of chaos. SIVs went down. Command Center was heavily delayed. The Reaper had to go back and deal with it, so we didn't get a scout. Could have been a follow-up. It was actually a fairly effective opener, all things considered, but maybe that was the evening effect, equalizing effect, when MaSa had gotten the, like, I want to say he got up to 13 or 14 drone kills.
Yeah, maybe even more, actually.
Maybe, yeah, because it was actually so consistent but small.
Yeah, small little bits of piece of damage. And actually also, really importantly, he wouldn't lose all of his units whenever he would actually do that damage, which made a huge difference. Because if you lose all the units and you trade out versus an okay number of drones, you're like, probably wasn't great. But the fact that he was able to keep going back in over and over again, pick off 2 or 3 more drones, only loses like 1 Hellion or 2 Hellions, that was what really allowed MaSa to continue that aggression while also getting up his economy behind it.
And those Ravens, like plural, is such a pain to deal with on Abyssal Reef that we actually see some other Zerg players go for, well, first of all, Spore Crawlers specifically try and deal with that, but they can't deal with the entire ridge that is unnatural, but also a Spine Crawler.
Okay, well, Ling's getting here a little bit later this time, so Orbital Command is already on the way, and the SCV is going to be well protected by those 2 Marines.
Yeah, I did bother building Marines before building a tech lab because, actually, no, he is building a starport, but it might only be for a Viking, and then even maybe, I suppose a medevac for like a drop, but not the tech lab swap, Viking, Raven, even Banshee that he's been doing otherwise.
Going straight into the medevacs. We might actually be seeing the Hellion drop straight into the main base that we've sometimes seen.
Or how about push?
Ooh.
Since he's building Marines and not building anything else in the barracks, he will have a lot to add to the push. That DPS sounds so small, but when you consider how many Marines, like, it actually does really add up. It allows you to actually get that last shot on the Queens. And this is something that MaSa has not thrown out yet, I think, today, that we've seen of him.
No.
Of course, Scarlet didn't get many chances.
I don't think we've seen it versus any Zerg players today, but I think we've definitely seen it a few times from MaSa in the past, and it can be very, very strong. I'm trying to remember. He may have actually even gone for something like this versus Suppy.
Yeah, I mean, certainly every Terran player knows how to do this build or some variant of that, you know, Hellbats basically.
Yeah.
But I bring up the, you know, the whole day not doing this because this is something that JonSnow might not be expecting. He's always seen a tech lab added onto the starport whenever he's watched MaSa's games or played against him.
Okay, 5 Marines also going to be accompanying this push. Nice for sniping off some of those Overlords. They're getting that extra little bit of DPS versus the Queens, which are going to have a harder time outranging those Marines. But here we go. Pushing on to creep. Suddenly, JonSnow should know what's happening. The Queens are all coming on in a nice concave.
Yeah, I always wonder why Terrans choose this spot in particular, because what they're doing is maybe catching the Queens out of position, but they're also getting into a concave against the Queens. But actually not pulling back some of those already loses a few. The Lings have all been wasted. While the medevac was finally target fired, I think 3 Queens have already died.
Yeah, and the units are still alive, and while there's not as much sustainability without the medevacs of this push in, he's starting to get damage done to the drones now. 5 have already gone down. All the Lings are getting absolutely demolished. And the Queen's still alive, still chipping away at these Hellbats. It looks like he will eventually be able to clean this up, but definitely taking a lot of losses in the process.
Yeah, he's going to get that one last Queen. He really wants it, but he needs one more hit. So close, but dang, that was a lot more damage than I certainly expected. When they get that concave, the splash damage from the Hellbats is like nothing, and the medevac is micro, it means it's not healing. A lot of the times, that's actually a great, you know, response by the Zerg, but I guess he was a little too far apart from each other.
And not only that, but it wasn't even, like, he only actually killed 6 workers at the end of the day, but it was all the Queens he killed. It was all the Lings he killed. I mean,
if he had done that, if he had killed 33 Lings and 6 drones, but then all 5 Queens live with 2 health, I'm actually like,
yeah,
okay.
Transfuse is
right.
good.
Yeah, Transfuse, like creep spread and all that, but that is everything combined together made that a really effective push, certainly surprisingly so for me, but MaSa's got to be pretty happy about that. JonSnow just has to, I guess, focus on his macro once again, going for the lair, going for whatever drones needs to replace, which unfortunately doesn't put him in a very good position here. 42 to 45, MaSa.
Yeah, that's going to get a little bit rough, as he definitely wants an opportunity to continue to just drone up right now. But you can see he's getting a few drones here and there, but he still has to remake all those Lings that he lost in case there's more Hellions moving across the map, in case there's more damage. And there are actually Hellions moving across the map. There are Banshees making their way around the map to try and get some damage done. It's
actually super dangerous for Terrans not to at least make some more Hellions past that push in case the Lings do counter, like you actually do no damage and there's 20 Lings still alive. But they're not going to be used for very much, maybe distraction tactics. Something's going to get some damage here, but probably not a lot. Another Queen could go down. She's not being pulled back to the Spore Crawler, but at the last second, the Banshees instead went after another Queen. They could still sniper and get out, though. They're just not doing it.
MaSa's actually got some pretty nice Banshee micro usually, so we'll see if he is able to make his way back in. But Hellions going to be going in and trying to get some more drone damage done. He's able to evade the surround from these Lings, but a couple of Banelings do go off on some of these Hellions. Get 7 work kills. I would actually call that a rousing success.
Yeah, I mean, you really aren't going to use those Hellions anymore. Like, sometimes there's an argument to be made about them turning into Hellbats for the main Marine push, because it is going to be bio again, but usually they don't add very much. They don't soak up enough Banelings to truly be worth it. So, okay, 7 drones, not so bad. Still scouting, of course, that it is laying Baneling and expecting those Hydralisks, no doubt.
Siege Tank going to be pushing back those Lings. JonSnow loving those Ling run-bys, but not able to find any opportunities this time, nor many in the last game. I think he almost managed to find 1 or 2, but eventually ends up getting shut down before getting too much damage done. He's got Baneling speed on the way, though, and he's got the Hydra Den on the way, I believe, so we'll be able to go into that Ling Bling Hydra style that he so loves.
Yeah, well, every Zerg player is really loving nowadays. Which,
in every matchup.
Yeah.
Except for ZVZ, I guess.
I was going to say, not ZVZ. It worked out actually really well last game. It was the control of the Ultras, or positioning of the Ultras, you know, one or the other, that I think really screwed over JonSnow's game plan. He did have a solid setup until that point. The drops are found out. There's a couple of Banelings that he's trying to focus fire. Doesn't get many.
Yeah. Getting a little bit of damage done with one of those Banelings. The Banshees have also continuously been pushing in, takes a little bit of chip damage, and then repairs and comes back with a vengeance. But Marines now moving on forward. Mostly just the Queens over here to defend, but it looks like they are enough to push back MaSa for the moment while the Banshees try and move in. Ooh, spotting out those Hydras as well.
Yeah, always nice. The drone transfer is the best case scenario for Banshees after a certain time, to be honest.
Yeah.
Queens and Overseer do come forward, but they're still alive. They're going to be able to be scouters, creep deniers, get a couple of drones later on, too. The fact that he's alive usually not a big deal. it's sometimes a bit of a safety net for some Terran players.
Indeed. But, of course, +2 melee is on the way right now, and Infestation Pit finally being thrown down for JonSnow. So he has been doing this all tournament long. He's looking to go for that fast high-tech transition to get up that Ultralisk Cavern, to get up that late-game Zerg army and just crush his opponent.
And MaSa has decided to go for double tank production again. Seems there was an attempt to bust. Barely not enough to really do anything to bring SIVs forward to repair. Yeah. But yeah, double tank production with the slow push to the 4th base, which JonSnow took the base that kind of lines up at least a solid push path. If you take other bases, it can get, I think, kind of weird on such an ire, but this one's pretty direct. And MaSa might even expand to the left as well with a planetary. But those double tanks will actually start to really rise in count. So you don't take care of it right now when there's 4 tanks. Suddenly, before you know it, there's 8 of them, and going down a ramp is a really bad idea.
And he might have an opportunity here. He is getting out the Infestors, but here we go. Ling's starting to move it on. Ooh, actually deciding not to after seeing how deep the tank line goes. And loses quite a few Lings in the process. This, that might actually be a little bit costly, as you really don't want to be bleeding out units right here when you're already kind of on the ropes, investing a ton into this hive tech and not really getting much benefit from it yet.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that it's really only just begun. There's not like an Ultra Cavern on the way that would help him deal with this. He has actually got to deal with it with Ling, Baneling, Hydra, Infestor, which the Infestors could still be tricky, but they're already been scanned, so MaSa knows to pre-split. And he has a very powerful push that's only being reinforced. JonSnow tries to go for a counter, and he does find most of the Marines out of position, but there's a tank there too, and that's not enough Lings to really cause damage. Yeah,
kills off a handful of these workers, but honestly, MaSa's still up at 65, a very, very healthy count while he establishes that 4th base. But here we go, Ultralisk Cavern coming on the way. MaSa stimming on forward, picking off a couple of the Hydras and the Siege Tanks, obliterating any units that get a little bit too close for comfort.
He got a fungal on a bunch of Marines that didn't even have any follow-up for it. This is actually a really terrible position for JonSnow.
He's sitting down almost 50 army supply right now. Oh, Infestor sneaking its way forward, but there's not really many targets. He can go for them. Okay, there are some Marines over there, but like you said, not really much of a follow-up. All those Marines get almost instantly healed back up.
Yeah, the medevacs, if this Corrosive Biles, of course, go for it, but the Hydra's never going to get close enough, not with the amount of tanks that are still left over. And we even have now MaSa adding in Liberators, just more and more siege units that JonSnow's not going to be able to take care of. I believe he's already lost that 4th base. He does have a 5th. About ready to go, I believe. Yeah, I transferred the drones there already. And this is going to be a little more complicated to push into for MaSa. Maybe JonSnow can get this around. He's been looking for when it comes to defending this base.
Man, these siege tanks have been so good throughout this series so far in these 2 games. And a couple of Lings burrowed over there in the natural, but might be seeing them a little bit later on. MaSa getting chased back with the reinforcements. I do like this kind of old school style of Zerg, but at the same time, what are you going to do about your 3rd? What are you going to do about the actual push that's creeping its way forward?
Yeah, and he's at the same risk, I guess, that he was last game, where he doesn't have enough buffer for his ultras. So even though they come forward with plating, they might still get targeted down. Not by Marauders, but just by Marine, tank, and so many tanks.
This is an Infestor over there to the scan.
Oh, God. This is pretty desperate. The Kindness plating isn't done. He's just running in here.
Oh, God. And the Ultras, I mean, they're doing some good damage. And the Hydras may actually be enough over here. He is starting to clean up. The Medevacs will escape out of there. All the Siege Tanks have been cleaned up, though. And JonSnow does take a bit of a supply lead for now.
Yeah, that's... Oh, that is nice for him to finally be able to breathe easy. He's able to save that 3rd base, and he still has that 4th. MaSa did start to rally forward. He's going to have to pull back now and recollect himself, but he has a 4th CC done, and I believe that's been put on location. He did expand to the right side, not the left side. He's got a couple of drops now being sent out as he builds up his anti-Ultralisk army.
Yeah, Spire on the way, and it looks like JonSnow is finally going to be getting up that answer for the Liberators that he was seeing earlier on. So getting out some of those Corruptors, and of course, naturally transitioning out into those Broodlords later on if he finds the opportunity to complement those Ultras he's been making. But as he continues to rally out more and more units, he's still a good ways away from something like a max out. But do you think that it would make sense to try and get aggressive over here? Is MaSa even going to give him the opportunity to?
For JonSnow to be aggressive? Yeah. No, I think that's a little bit too scary. Against siege units, you got to be really confident, and he's lost Infestors. He had a couple bad fights in the beginning. I don't think his confidence is skyrocketing, even though he's finally able to get MaSa off of his back. So building up into that Spire seems to be his preference, and then when maybe he has Broodlords, he feels most confident.
Yeah, but he moves out into the middle of the map, and he gets punished for it as the hatchery gets killed over there. MaSa being able to shut down a little bit of the extra economy for JonSnow, allowing him to kind of get that planetary fortress up in a nice, safe location, dealing with the baneling run-bys, and seems to be handling things relatively well. But here we go. Big drop going into the main base. JonSnow, I don't think he's quite entirely into position. He has 2 ultras over here.
Yeah. 1 ultra will take care of most drops.
Yeah,
actually.
that's true.
So pretty good drop defense, but a very heavy supply commitment, if that's your plan. Here comes what is still a lot of tanks, barely avoiding the baneling bombs. Not that there's a ton of bio that would have been too juicy anyways.
Yeah. Well, every little bit of damage does help out. And speaking of every little bit of damage, 3 Marines pulling the entire army over to the natural, giving MaSa some nice space to clean up this creep.
Yeah. This right here, I think, would favor the Terran for an engagement, but as soon as MaSa is forced forward to do actual economic damage, get on top of that hatchery, that's when JonSnow gets a really good surround potential. So it's actually a really just a delicate situation. They're going to be there for a little while until they get those probably higher Liberator counts and siege hop the tanks forward.
1 or 2 ultras getting taken out. The Corruptor's trying to deal with those medevacs to try and prevent the lift up and continued harassment, but the hatchery is under fire, and it looks like it is going to end up falling. A single Viper almost joining the fray, but realizing it is for naught at this point. He's got to have the reinforcements. He's got to take a good engagement after losing that very important mining base.
Yeah, he replaced the one he lost in the first place in the bottom left, but he's only been on 4-base mining for a while, which originally gave him enough of a bang not to be too bad, but now I imagine he's running out of minerals in the first 3 bases, severely oversaturated, at that 4th base. So MaSa in a pretty great position, still has to be a little wary of being surrounded. Now he's got so many Liberators, he still has so many tanks. I'm not sure how JonSnow is really prepared to take this battle. Usually you see more bio, clumps of bio that you know how to size up and take on. This is more like a mech push.
I was going to say, I almost want to call this a mech composition because there's just so many Liberators and tanks, even though it is primarily bio. But here we go. Ultra's going through the choke point of that ramp, and the siege tanks doing so much damage. That line of siege tanks going so far back, and it seems like he's going to be able to clean up most of these Ultras. The Corruptor's getting some damage on, and do kill off a good chunk of the medevacs, but it's not going to be enough. GG gets called. MaSa takes a 2-0 lead.
Again, with a style that I'm not totally expecting to win, but I really like that one especially. Like, the amount of tanks he's able to build and save and build again. Like, you have a line that deep of tanks. It must have been like 8, right? Like, in an actual line. Even if he had tried blinding clouds instead of abducts, there was really no great way to take a fight on that ramp against that army.
Yeah, really, really makes it difficult. And for those who don't know, people don't usually consider siege tanks a good answer or standard answer to Ultralists. You were talking about this earlier. It's that thing that theoretically, siege tanks do a ton of damage to armored units, and Ultralists are armored units. But in practice, they close the distance a little bit too quickly, and you just get kind of get run over very quickly.
I would say it's one of those classic things, like Ultras see maybe the big bad, part of the Zerg army, but it's actually the Lings and Banelings that accompany it that you realize, like, oh, I could have sniped a dozen Ultras with bio control, but actually Banelings came forward. So, of course, I feel like tanks kind of, play to that in a big way, where tanks are great against pure Ultra on a ramp and a choke, but then you send Lings from the back, and tanks are like, I don't know what do. They just actually suck.
Well, it looks like Interloper going to be at map number 3. This is MaSa's second choice for a map.
I like this is the same vetoes that he had with Jim Rising, by the way.
It doesn't surprise me that much.
No.
JonSnow was watching that whole series, trying to pick up any kind of information he could.
Oh, Zerg player vetoing Catalina. I never.
I feel like not just versus Terran, but especially versus MaSa. Oh my God, MaSa and Catalina, MaSa and Proxies also especially. I feel like.
Yeah, he's a scary guy. You were talking about that earlier, about his style and why it's kind of hard to pinpoint down. He was at one point super cheesy.
There used to be some statistic about in best of 5s. I think it was game 3 was the most common game to see proxies on. This is a very old statistic from 2011. I remember being heard.
I feel like sometimes I watch other esports. I know, guys, sorry, but they get these really obscure looking stats. In this map, in this time, with this hero, with this team, X things happen. I'm like, Is it really going to be useful? But actually, it sometimes really is. I kind of feel like StarCraft 2 is missing that. You can look up the Liglac scores, which are sometimes incorrect. But besides that, I mean, you know, how many times in the last month has MaSa cheesed on maps larger than 40-second rushes? Like something really detailed, you know what I mean?
I would love some more statistics like that. There's actually one great guy in the community, Toferdal. He comes up with crazy awesome random statistics. And he was actually one of the guys that after WCS Valencia, Rotterdam kept talking about like the spawn advantage. I can't even remember if it was north or south. Like he firmly believes that there's like a small little spawn advantage on either north or south of any map because of the way that camera angles work and because of the way that StarCraft isn't directly looking down at things. It's actually at a bit of an angle. So you kind of get a small little advantage in helping deal with drops and stuff. I was like, Rotterdam, you're crazy. And then Toferdal compiled all these statistics, and he was like, actually, yeah, it's like a 4% advantage for this spawn, according across like these like 500 games or something.
Get even more detailed. Find out how many times a Terran player spawned on either side, and how many times the reactor being on the wrong end has forced their games to end prematurely.
Yeah, that's actually a fun one.
Because I mean, I play Terran mainly. Player. I just that was my right now. I know, of course, that the different spawns matter. I could have told you that.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, well, there's still the question, will we see MaSa go for mech? I know we were joking about how he had so many Liberators and tanks that it felt like mech, but in reality, it's really not the kind of mech game that we're talking about. The kind of mech game that we're talking about, you get up a lot of those Hellions, like, I mean, a ton of those Hellions. You get up into those 2 Thors with the Metamax, you move around. Actually, if you would say stylistically, one thing that I really like about MaSa lately, it is his Thor Medevac micro sometimes is just out of this world good. I've seen him literally win games off of it.
So I realized something while you're talking about mech, and I'm now more interested. I don't care who wins or how they win, 3-0, 3-2, but I am interested to see if JonSnow is correct, because MaSa actually is never going to play mech against him.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a stylistic thing. MaSa maybe used to try and play mech versus him and realize actually JonSnow just seems to handle it just fine. Actually, that's also what JonSnow was saying, is he said even if he does go for mech, I'm really good at it. I'm really good at handling mech. And some players are just like that. They just tend to do better versus a particular play style.
For sure. It makes a lot of sense. I think it made more sense when mech was really kind of stuck in that mass Raven, like you just turtle and there's nothing else you can do. Now it's a bit more of a dynamic match style for the matchup, so I enjoy it more, but it's like a different style on its own, and some people are better than others.
Okay, but here we go. We're going to be hopping into game number 3. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be starting down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. The red Zerg player from Storm Gaming. Give it up for...
Storm JonSnow.
Oh, man, the audience is sleeping on that one.
Took too long.
Took too long. All right, a little bit quicker this time. We have the top left-hand corner of the map. The blue Terran player. Give it up for...
OSC Pro MaSa.
I definitely heard one person saying JonSnow during that.
Yes, I wonder who that was. Well, so it's Interloper. You're bringing up like the Thor drop, certainly bringing up any type of strong positional-based push. That's the most vague way I can put it. Interloper goes for both races, all races actually. But it is definitely one of the maps that is a little bit different. You have Odyssey, which is a lot like Ascension Ire, which has a lot of similarities like how many bases you take, how long the game technically goes, so kind of like some similarities with Acolyte and Abyssal Reef being probably the best map we've had in a while. All styles can be played, all types of games can be played. And then you have Interloper, which is a lot like Terraform, which is the beginning of Legacy of the Void beta, and it just is such a different style of map that you do really have to play a little bit to it more than others.
Yeah, just having those rocks you can knock down outside your natural, you can cut down on the number of pathways over to your third, but the third still has a lot of pathways into it. I mean, there's just so many small little things about this map that make it pretty interesting, but it is worth noting that despite that, JonSnow's still going to be going for the earlier pools, so as much as we talk about differences on this map, it seems like he really is still loving making those early links, sending them across the map, and potentially dodging that Reaper.
Well, you know, imagine 5-8 seconds, however much quicker it is to get over there on Interloper. That first game, he didn't get close to killing the command center, but maybe it is a little bit different. So actually, MaSa aware of any aggressive potential SIV scouts. It's a little bit peculiar, but definitely.
Just leave your Reaper. It looks like
idea.
Yeah, MaSa just leaves his Reaper at home.
The one bad thing about leaving a Reaper at home is that what if it's not just the Lings? What if there's
a roach warren behind it?
Yeah, there's roaches behind it. Like the Reaper still kind of needs to scout. And if the SIV gets a full scout, which it did, it would actually still see the
Well, Zombie Grub, I have the answer to
premonition.
this question. If there are roaches, he loses because we saw that versus Scarlet today.
If that was that easy, like the other 6 would have already done it.
I know, right? If only MaSa were that easy of a Terran player to defeat.
Yeah.
Well, got our, of course, Ling speed on the way, and I guess JonSnow can still try and get something done over here in terms of like scouting information or something, because we do have a pretty quick starport and tech lab coming up also.
He can still get an SIV kill by waiting out this Reaper. It's
Oh,
really,
yeah.
it's annoying, but it's not as bad as losing the SIV all in the command center. So, okay, just take the loss and moan and groan about it later. You will scout the third base being taken, which is in itself a really great scout.
Well, he's got the minerals for it, but he's not throwing it down. I think the Reaper was getting pretty close to that drone, but okay, third base. Let's get started.
MaSa actually brought the SIV home, or to the main.
Oh.
He didn't even lose an SIV to that.
All right,
Look at
solid. Reaper even mixed it into the main base, gets a full scout on everything right now, and gonna cause some sort of harassment inside the natural.
He didn't go for the third, though, I think.
Yeah.
So that is actually down building. Would have been nice to snipe the drone. But I was going to comment on the fast Overlord speed that we see from JonSnow, who was pretty confident in what his opponent was going to play stylistically, did get surprised by that Hellbat push. Not just surprised, but handled it worse than maybe he had hoped.
Yeah, absolutely. That really did put him behind that last game, but okay, this game he's not only going to be able to move into the main base and get a full scout, but he confirms Cloak is being researched. He sees a Viking come out, so Overlord will eventually die as long as MaSa controls that Viking well, and there goes Pop, but he now also has Overlord speed, so he can pull in the rest of his Overlords or try and dodge out of the way of that Viking.
Yeah, that's another benefit. MaSa's been going for Vikings like every single game. And while their actual Overlord kill count may not be that important unless they get like 3 or 4, and that's pretty good, being able to dodge away and then bring them back later once the Viking has died or has been forgotten about means that MaSa can't get away with those drops, which have been rather potent this series. You know, they might have been a little bit later. It wasn't the 2-on-1 drop into a victory. It was still enough drops to really give him a headache.
Ooh, actually being able to snipe off, it looks like some of the larvae or something over there. Nice job with the Hellions, just finding little bits and pieces of damage, not a ton. But the Viking, of course, having a hard time finding many Overlords. The Queens are going to be over here to help defend. One lone wow, the one moment that MaSa decides not to stick around, the drone pops out.
Lucky drone. Lucky, lucky. So the Roach Horn was built, by the way. So he's building Roaches, not Ling Bane Ling Hydra, which might be a big surprise for MaSa. There are certainly ways to overwhelm your opponents who's thinking, okay, they're going to get upgrades, they're going to go to Hydras, and that's when I have to worry. When they first see the Roaches at this time, I think MaSa's immediately going to panic and be like, oh, God, are you all-inning me?
Oh, wait a second. We just had the Queens load up into the Overlord. Oh, my God. This is one of those moments, Zombie Guard, where I always remember JonSnow is a teammate of True, and True is a huge fan of this build. He loves doing this. And JonSnow, I've seen him do it pretty successfully, too, as well.
I definitely like this build against specifically like 1-1-1 openers, which most Terran players do. So that's, you know, it's good against most things. But I think he actually didn't go for the greediest possible third CC, MaSa that is.
Yeah.
So this might work out. It might not. I don't want to say it's a good build quite yet. Finds the Raven.
Oh, that's actually really nice. Being able to soften it up so much. Even if it manages to survive, it's going to take some time to repair back up. And the Roaches and the Queens are already at the front door.
Yeah, his Marine production has really only just started, but his bunkers were put down as soon as he saw anything was coming his way. And by actually dropping everything here, he does have to bust through the wall first, which is taking some time.
Yeah, the kind of funny thing about this is those Ravagers are going to make things a lot easier to try and bust through. Even the command center is getting pretty low, to be honest.
He brought some Ravagers up to the high ground. He's trying to target fire the tank,
Whoa.
or at least get the tank to target fire the not grouped up units.
But he loses the Ravagers to the Liberator up on the high ground. Kind of funny positioning for that Liberator, but it definitely works out. Now the Queen's going to try and unload up on the high ground, but he loses one Queen. Another Queen not really surviving, and that last Queen looks like it's going to end up losing its life soon.
If that had actually survived longer, it would have stopped the supply depots from raising. In fact, the supply depots still aren't raising, so the tank could have been under fire, but there's just enough Marines to take care of the Lings.
Oh, this is starting to look really difficult for JonSnow because even if he leads up a little bit in supply, you have to remember this is a very, very committed attack right now.
Yeah.
And MaSa has 3 CCs. Zombie Girl, 3 CCs is just this magic number.
Yeah, 3cc is going to be able to recover from a lot of damage, and really there hasn't been many SEV losses. 3cc can easily cover whatever this, how many have died at 41 to 40. MaSa actually doesn't have to replace the SEVs to still be in a good position. He's going to have maybe even faster upgrades once he starts actually using the engineering base. I don't believe he has yet. And he will be able to have the power of drops. So like as soon as the Zerg player has to pull back, that's when drops really start being a problem for specifically roaches.
Yeah, oh god, especially after losing all of those queens, it's going to be so annoying trying to deal with those drops. But we'll see when MaSa decides to try and get that, I guess, off the ground, as the next two medevacs are going to be popping on out. A couple of drones are going pop as well. Where are they going down? Over the natural, maybe?
To a Liberator, perhaps, that he had sent over there? The drones. Yep, Liberator.
Yep. In
Nailed
the main base, and now moving over to that natural. Queen will snipe it off, which is nice. 4 drones for Liberator. Not the worst defense in the world.
Yeah, so I'd still put MaSa in a very comfortable position, especially once he starts those upgrades. But JonSnow, by going for Roach Ling all in and off of 3 bases as well, he doesn't have the worst economy. Basically, I want to say that he has a good enough economy to maybe get to Infestors. And you can get to Infestors with Fungal and Ravagers. You can actually take the most cost-efficient trades ever, which is going to make up for a bad economy here. But he needs to get to those Infestors first, which he's not doing currently. He actually went for upgrades. Roach speed, obviously something you got to get, but if you only plan on Roaches, I think the MaSa is going to be able to tear him apart.
This is definitely going to get very, very dicey, as now the 2 medevacs coming in at the same time as a Liberator. And does JonSnow even have enough answers to try and deal with both of these aerial forms of harassment? Oh, Liberator getting shots off on the Queen, gonna be able to snipe it off, cutting down on even more of the anti-air capabilities over here. Ravagers are gonna be able to come over there to help out, but double medevac drop in the main base, encountering some of the Roaches, but now just gonna go over to the 3rd, which looks relatively unprotected.
The Ravagers are making their way to that 3rd base, so it won't be doing game-ending damage, but gets another Queen is gonna be able to get out of there. Still scouts nothing but Roaches as well. No Infestors to worry about quite yet. 9 drones have gone down. The medevacs live, and MaSa's on a 3rd base, getting to his 2-2 finally.
But look at the supply, zombie grub. It's inflated with roaches.
I was going to say, that's not actually too great of a supply to look at.
It is really misleading, because even though JonSnow is leading up in supply, he's got so many roaches, which are just not going to be the unit that you want. As this moves later and later into the game, it's going to be so hard. He has to make something happen with these roaches now, or I think all hope is going to be lost soon.
Well, 2 tanks aren't sieged. He gets through the choke. Yeah, kind of. 4 tanks, 5 tanks, actually.
Move on forward. If he starts stutter stepping forward, I think he can do something. Couple Lings also coming in from the north side. Roaches coming in from the south side. Where did they come from? Suddenly, JonSnow getting a pretty big cleanup, but he's going to trade it out for his 3rd base.
And that was huge that some Roaches came in from the other direction. The fact that 2 tanks weren't sieged and that some of them were attacking the wrong side of things. He doesn't actually have the wall up in the main base. His production's going to be camped, and it might just be a base trade.
Oh man, this is going to get really dicey. There's one golden rule in StarCraft, and that's that you do not base trade a Terran player. And even though JonSnow seems like he has a really, really solid looking army, MaSa can lift up. JonSnow can't.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's really going to get into that situation. MaSa actually just has an inferior army right now. His Marines have to be all together. Well, their upgrades are actually going to finish, so maybe it's a little bit better. But they have to be all together. The medevacs have energy to heal, as he's going to be stimming a lot to take out bases. And the chances of that actually working still, even after all that's done, is still maybe low.
Okay, but he's going after the last remaining hatchery. And JonSnow, he does not have enough money for another hatchery. He's sitting at 290 minerals right now, and the last hatchery goes down.
Oh, my God. JonSnow going up a ramp with a portion of his army, realizing that's a big mistake.
He's still getting
pulls
minerals.
back. I mean, if he's going to save the hatcheries and lose his entire army, this was not the attack JonSnow was actually looking for. His army supplies plummets. And this might just be it for JonSnow.
Oh, the final Ravagers go down, and GG gets called. MaSa takes the 3-0 over JonSnow, advances on to the next stage of the losers bracket.
Yeah, very clutch right there. JonSnow having to come back home.